Welcome, everybody, to the Follow D Money podcast. This week, I have a friend of mine who I've known for years. Been trying to get him on the podcast for a little bit as well. He's a friend of mine, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to let him expound on who he is and why he's on my podcast, though. It's my boy, Greg Stowers. What's up, brother?
What's good, man?
How are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you for the invitation. I know we've been working on it for a while, but happy to be here and chit chat a little bit.
Yeah. Mostly, I think the main reason that you're here is because of your connection to the city.
Yep.
You have a connection to the city, and it's important. People like you are very important to a city like Indianapolis.
Make sure my mom sees that. We gotta make sure she sees that.
Yeah, Mom, he is very important to the city. But let's get a brief history of Greg, where you grew up, where you came up, what you're doing, what is your professional life.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up north side of Indy.
Yep.
The oldest of 5 kids to 2 amazing parents. Went to North Central, North Central for high school. One of the largest high schools in the state, and that's where a lot of where I am today started.
Right.
I recognized early on that I was in the middle, and it's something that's continued as I've grown up. There would be Saturday mornings where I wake up and be out on the boat on Geist, and then the next 12 hours from then be at the apartment party in Jabot jeans and Jordans.
Right.
So that kind of showed me sort of some of the inequities that existed.
Right.
But again, I was in the middle of it. So from there, I went to Indiana State University, where I graduated with a degree in political science.
Yep.
Had the unique and great opportunity to intern for then Senator Obama in 2008.
Yep.
Graduated, thought I was going to come out and be the next great political thing, but life has a way of lifing, as we all know. But had some pretty solid jobs coming out of college, but it wasn't in the political space like I wanted to be.
Right.
So around 2015, a mentor of mine sat me down and said, "Hey, you need to get back in the game. We need you in this game." And it started with knocking on doors, making phone calls for city council candidates. That turned into a job on a governor's race. My OG, John Gregg, in 2016. Unfortunately, we lost that race.
Yep. That's a tough race in Indiana, though.
It's tough. It's tough. But we were teed up in a real way, and a lot of things happened that kind of got in the way of that. But then I was fortunate enough to work for current Mayor Joe Hogsett for a while. Hired me on his staff as his special assistant, and I'm still very close with a number of people that I worked with when I was there. It really taught me the value of relationships and power structures in a real way within the city. Those people that got the juice and those people that don't. Then I worked for some nonprofits in the city. One nonprofit in the city, and then I worked for a international nonprofit called Kiwanis International, where I oversaw Key Club International, 250,000 students around the globe. But again, I wasn't necessarily involved in politics like I wanted to be. Got a call from my OG, John Gregg, and I've been in Ice Miller ever since, where I serve as the Director of Public Affairs. Where I would say I solve problems for a variety of stakeholders on any given day, working with city government, state governments, and federal government as well. So it's been an interesting trajectory. Someone asked me a couple of days, "Did you think you'd ever be here?" And I was like, I could see it. I think 17-year-old me could have seen it, which brings up the sort of existential question of, okay, what do you want to do? Are you not dreaming big enough? But working for Ice Miller, which is a great opportunity, great job. I love the people I work with. I love some of the projects that we were able to work on. But then I'm also community oriented. So, way before Ice Miller, I was doing community stuff. So on a number of nonprofit boards, I'll rattle those off real quick. Indie Hub, the Washington Township Schools Foundation, the Mitch Daniels Leadership Fellows fellows group as well, and then I sit on the city board too. So I do the most.
Yeah, you do a lot.
I do the most, and I'm learning the importance of saying no at times.
Because you stretching yourself thin.
Yeah. And then you can't really put yourself into things the way that you want to. Right. So I think that's me in a nutshell. I think that's the quickest I've ever told that story. So
I think you did it really well.
Strong.
It was a good 4-minute introduction to Greg.
There you go. Okay.
So all those things, what is your trajectory? What do you see yourself doing in 5 years?
Oh man, that actually came up a couple weeks ago. I still think I will be in this sort of community engagement space.
Okay.
Like I said, my job is incredibly unique.
Yep.
Growing up, I didn't know jobs like this existed. In a very layman's term kind of way, I get to be the plug for a living.
Yeah.
In a legitimate sense.
Yep.
And there are people around me that have done it for 20 years, and I could certainly see that trajectory. But I'm a person that is always focused on how to build and grow. So trying to build and grow the things that we're doing at ICE, the things that I'm doing within the community too.
Yep.
I wish I had a concrete answer. But I think it's also interesting looking back 5 years ago and writing that kind of letter and like, oh man, like if you were to write a letter to yourself from 5 years ago, it'd be like, man, like, did I see this? I didn't necessarily see it this way, but it makes sense.
Right.
I think the tunnel is getting a little more closed in, that light is getting a little closer. But I'm work in progress.
Yep.
And I'm grateful to, in the great words of Nipsey Hussle, represent the progress.
Yep.
For a lot of people that I'm close to, and I say that humbly.
Yeah.
But being humble sometimes doesn't work as well as being aware.
Yep.
And it's we're having a good time, but certainly thinking about how I can be helpful and how I can support people in the future too.
How do you use any advice that you were given along the way? What motivates you? Do you have any words of advice that someone gave you and you just kind of stick with that?
Yeah. I like I said, my parents were my first mentors.
Yep.
I didn't really have mentors because they did such a great job. But one of the things that is so simple that sticks out is a fraternity brother of mine. His name is Jeremy Wally.
Yep.
Back when we were going through the pledge process, we would always say, do a good job. And I've had people around me who were like, man, what does that mean? What do you mean when you say do a good job? I'm like, if you don't know what that means, then you're doing it wrong.
Right.
But that's something that just kind of sticks out for me. And then in terms of motivation, I work with the Center for Leadership Development. Again, this is going back to me doing way too much.
Yeah.
But I serve as a facilitator for their Project Mr. program.
Okay.
And to have 150 younger Black boys that you are in a roundabout way responsible for 6 weeks out of the year, they motivate me. They're the reason I vote the way that I vote. They're the reason that I'm, so focused on community and making sure that I'm engaging in a thoughtful way. So those are the pieces that motivate me. And then, like I said, I'm the oldest of 5. Yeah. So my siblings also are an incredible motivating factor.
Yeah.
And then, really younger people in a real sense, how I can utilize my experiences to help move them forward and make sure that they don't make the same mistakes or go through the same things that I went through.
Yep.
Yeah, my therapist has been working on the whole trauma thing, and shout out to her for all of that work.
That's what's up. Why do you think it's so important for you to be so involved with the community?
I don't know where it started. My parents weren't necessarily the most involved. They were very involved with us, which I'm thankful for. But, part of it goes back to high school. Like I was, overly involved, student body president, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And while it's not necessarily the coolest thing to talk about now, right? I'm not walking around my homecoming king hat.
Right.
Those seeds.
But you won?
Okay. Yeah, I won. Okay. Yeah, I won that thing, boy.
Okay.
Yeah, came through with it.
We're amongst royalty right now. NC King.
But
I'm gonna call you Kang.
come on now.
Kang.
I had the whole joint. I walked around school with it like, excuse me. But a lot of those seeds were planted there.
Yep.
And just looking around the community and not seeing a number of young people and then a number of Black people working in these spaces, it's
Right.
like, I got to be there.
Right.
A number of rooms that I'm in that I'm sure you're probably in too, it's like, man, I don't see anybody that looks like me.
Right.
And that lack of representation is something that has kind of driven me.
Right.
But it's not like I want to be the only one. Like as much as I'm climbing, I'm bringing other people with me.
That's the conversation that I have all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One, we walk in the same circles.
Yeah. In the trenches sometimes.
In the trenches sometimes.
Shout out to the trench guy, Marcus Kearney. Shout out to my man.
But we, even though all of us connected in a way, we could still be the only one
100%.
somewhere, you know. And I think one of the biggest issues that we fight and that we fight for is access.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a lot of diversity begins with access.
Yeah, for sure.
It's lack of access,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I try to communicate that with my non-Black brothers and sisters,
Right.
that in order to diversify, you have to open the doors. You have to bring and create access for people like us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like going and being the only Black guy.
No. I mean,
At one point I thought it was cool. I did.
right. But then you
realize it's like, why am I here?
why, yeah. And you know, why is, you got to think about systems too. Like, why is this normal? Right. Like, and especially in a state like Indiana, I've spent like 2 weeks in DC over the past 3 months and around predominantly Black folks.
Yeah.
And you come back here and it's not a culture shock because we're used to it, but it makes you think like, man, like there's places and spaces that are actually diverse. Like I'm eating Salvadorian food and, you know, I'm going to, you know, Muslim coffee shops and then you come back here and you gotta work to kind of find those spaces and places.
Right.
And they exist and there are people that are doing great work, but like it isn't something that is just the norm. And I think it's just incumbent on us to continue to push that in a real way from a cultural standpoint, making sure that we are highlighting these different spaces and then also holding people accountable.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, after George Floyd, I mean, the number of conversations that I was having around diversity and inclusion and, you know, people, I remember, I'm not going to say his name, but I remember getting a text and it was like, hey man, I just want to buy you lunch. And I'm like, you want to buy me lunch? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, man, I just don't know how to help. I want to buy you lunch. And I'm like, so you giving me lunch reparations? Is that what you're doing?
Right.
But if you don't know and you haven't been engaged in a thoughtful way and you're just you kind of look at people as, oh, this is my Black friend, that may be how you engage it.
Right.
And
we're a safe place.
Safe Black.
Yeah.
There's I'm gonna drop some names here as we go through it, and I think it's safe to do it. But my homegirl Portia Bailey Bernard, who is with the Indy Chamber, we did a panel discussion, and she used the word Safe Black.
Yeah.
In a way where, like, as a Safe Black, it's like, man, like I hate that, but like.
But it's a real thing.
But you also learn how to navigate in certain spaces that weren't built for you in a real way.
Yeah.
And she highlighted it in front of a group of people, and I could just see like the wheels turning. Like, damn,
right,
that's true, right? And again, being able to kind of be seen like that, you got to push things slowly, right? Understanding the sort of incrementalism. That certain people don't, right? And everyone goes at things differently, but like I recognize the importance of some of these baby steps, right? And then, you know, getting not allies, but getting friends to see things differently. I think there's a huge difference between ally and friend. Like a friend is going to show up like regardless.
Right.
An ally is like, hey, let's do an Instagram post and then I'm going to move on. No, like I need friends, not allies.
Right.
So, in a roundup, I mean, that's a very long answer, but you know, diversity is just incredibly important to me too. So,
yeah. You spoke about it earlier where you were like in the middle where you were on a boat at one point, and then the same day.
Damn, we was on a boat at one point. Damn.
We on a boat. But then you go into the,
Right.
the apartments and you chilling with a different walk of life.
Yep.
You have an opportunity to show your perspective because a lot of people
100%.
only see one.
Right.
So you have two. I have two as well.
Right.
So we have this, I like to call it a superpower
100%.
because we can speak on both sides
Right.
and rationalize the reasons why things happen on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that people appreciate that enough.
Yeah, and there are probably certain people that get paid a lot of money to be able to do that.
Right.
But it's understanding those nuances too. The nuances of being a relatively younger Black person who grew up here, that was motivated here, was inspired here, but also saw things that weren't necessarily the best.
Yeah.
Things that may have been a little bit nefarious at times. But then also seeing that on the other side too. But then having the understanding now to recognize, like, that's black and white, but what about, my Asian brothers and sisters, my Latino brothers and sisters, all that too. So
Right.
It's just important to keep in mind, like, we are, while we're blessed to have sort of that cultural insight into, both worlds, there are other worlds out there that exist.
Yep.
And that's something that we may have missed out on in a real way when we think about sort of our upbringing here in Indiana. I think that gets to it though.
Yeah,
Right?
I think for me, and it's delicate because coming from LA, when you say you have two perspectives, like, to me, the Latino experience is the same as the Black experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when we say black and brown, like it's just black or just brown.
Right.
It's black and brown and white,
Mm-hmm.
black and brown and yellow and
Mhm.
white. You know what I
Right,
mean? So two perspectives, but there are a wide range of cultures behind those.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And-
it's not monolithic.
No,
right?
it's not monolithic. You're right.
And and we run into it in a real way where we see, like, I got some homies out there who are doing some things.
Yeah.
Right. Then on the other side, I got, like last night I had through a fundraiser, and I had people from all walks of life there. I had lawyers, I had accountants, I also had, union folks there too. So, I mean, it's this wide variety of what the Black experience looks like.
Yep.
And going back to the previous piece, it's like people don't see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their only interaction with Black folks is, man, BT,
Yeah.
or what they see on TV, and it's
Yeah.
like, nah, we're a little more nuanced than that. We are multiple sums in a
Right,
sense.
right.
We are hiding a multitude of thoughts and opinions in a very real way. And I think it was James Baldwin who said that, Black people are the conscience of American society. And it was a very real thing that I heard growing up. And I'm like, man, like, it didn't really make sense. But it registers a lot more when I think about some of the issues that I see, that a lot of my friends and colleagues see. It's like, we have a perspective on things that is just very unique.
Right.
And I think all minorities do, in a sense. And, I think it's just important that those things are discussed in a very real and very thoughtful and honest way.
Yep.
Yep.
Do you see, because you were talking about in 5 years you were going to be probably in the same spectrum, just probably more in depth.
Hopefully it's more money too.
But I've always looked at you in the political realm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an aspiration for you?
If there is a place for me to serve the people that makes sense, I certainly would entertain, something of that nature. But being in the space that I'm in, and having the experiences that I've had, I also recognize that you can make an impact without being in office.
Right.
For all the potential accolades and major wins that elected officials can have, those structures have a way of creating shackles.
Yeah.
And there are some incredible community people around here that, that I've talked to, and we're like, man, like, I want to run for office. And I'm like, well, that you may not be able to be as active in this if you're here.
Right.
And then understanding the structure about how things work, right? Like, I've been lucky and privileged in a sense to attend a number of, some of these city council meetings or state budget meetings or whatever, and seeing how that process works. I think I think it would be interesting for people who want to run to actually go through that and see that, because it changes things.
Right.
Going to a community meeting and getting yelled at for 2 hours. Are you ready for that? Is that something you're ready for?
Right.
Right now, Greg at 35, I'm too honest. I'd have a retort. I'd have a retort to a lot of that stuff. But right now my focus is one, making sure that I'm doing the best job I can on behalf of my clients. But then also helping to empower some of those future leaders. And that starts with not only getting out and voting, but also being engaged, right? And I think part of engagement is also giving money.
Yeah.
Campaigns cost money.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, specifically in our community, don't think that's a thing. It's like, I'm going to just go knock doors and I'm going to go vote. And it's like, have you thought about the way the data impacts the way that we vote?
Yeah.
And that data and, being able to go up on TV, that costs money.
Yeah.
And that's something that I am not overly focused on, but we talk about the next 5 years. I think I want to make sure that Black and minority voters are engaged in a more unique way, in a more intentional way.
How do you think those voters get more involved? Because we do have a midterm election coming up.
We do.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
And I think that even being registered to vote is not a priority.
Yeah.
In our community.
Yeah.
And voting is very important. And I think that something gets lost in the struggle, thinking that we only vote for presidents.
100%.
And
100%.
And it's extremely important to vote on these local elections, these midterm elections, because they determine what laws are made and what affects us the most, really.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you'll see, so, as we, particularly in a presidential election year, you'll see the commercials, right? You'll see the Joe Biden commercial or the potential Donald Trump commercial, and those will just be running on a consistent loop. And there's money that goes into that. During a midterm election, it's a little quieter.
Yeah.
And those numbers are drastically down.
Right.
And typically, the party that is, holding the presidency at the time, are holding not only like the executive office, but also the legislative office. Yep. So like Congress, House of Representatives and Senate, they tend to lose control during the midterms because of that drop off. Yeah. So in terms of engaging people, it has always been tough. But there are things that happen that make people want to come out. So what we've seen here in Indiana specifically is abortion.
You're right.
It is a hot button issue, and I am pro-choice in a very real and honest way. I lean on women's opinions on that. I certainly have my own, but it's not my space. Right. And I recognize that. One, I'm not a doctor. Two, I'm not a woman. But I can certainly advocate in a real way. But I think it's incumbent upon men to shut up during some of this. Yeah. But those hot button issues bring voters out.
Right.
And we're gonna see. Some people are single votes or, only vote on single issues. Yeah. And that may be a thing. But in terms of, like I said, in terms of engaging, it takes some intentionality, right? It takes people feeling involved in the process. It takes people doing a little bit more than saying, hey, come out and vote. Come out and vote. Right. What am I voting for? Right. Like, being able to break down, like, you see all these big numbers like, the federal government gave $1 billion here, $20 billion here. How does that break down to a regular voter, right? Yeah. So gave all this money for infrastructure, billions of dollars have gone out for infrastructure. How does that trickle down to, a bridge in Indianapolis? And there are ways that, elected officials can speak to those things in a real way. And I think it's important for them and people who are working in this political space to be able to break it down to the lowest common denominator. Yep. And not in a way where you're dumbing it down, but it's like, I don't know, $60 billion is a lot of money. Yeah. I don't know how we get to me. And I think that's what galvanizes people when it's like, okay, this is what we've been able to do. And not just telling them to vote, but telling them why they're voting for.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of people, respectfully, have just gotten away with, man, just come out and vote. Come out and vote. Why? What am I voting for?
Right.
So when I'm talking about engaging voters differently, those questions gonna come up.
Yep.
It's when I get phone calls for donations, it's like, what's your win number? I'm like, what do you mean a win number? I'm like, oh, I know what time it is. Like, I need to know your path to victory, how you plan on getting there.
Wow.
And, I'm not cutting huge checks yet.
Right.
Yet. But, being able to hold people accountable in those rooms, because I've been able to see it, and I've been blessed to be around people who have taught me how things work. We got to be asking those questions in a real way.
Yep.
And more often than not, our engagement is, hey, you should come and vote, or I'm going to pull up to church. And that's all we see.
Right.
We've got to be in the game, put some skin in the game in a real way. And so when I talk about like giving money, it's important. If you care about abortion issues, and you're not going out knocking doors and making phone calls for women candidates, you're not donating their campaigns, what are you really doing?
Right.
It takes some investment, some personal investment outside of just putting stuff on social media. And I think that's important, right? It's important to have all facets of it. But if you really want to make an impact, like, show me something. Show me that you've knocked some doors. Show me that you've made some phone calls, that you've engaged, that you've gone to candidate forums. That is the next step in that. The performative piece is great, right? Like, that's cool. Like, that galvanizes people. But, like, what does that turn into? And we haven't necessarily seen the data that shows posting something on Instagram is gonna move the needle. It may make you feel good, but that ain't changing.
Yeah, right.
That ain't changing nothing.
Right.
And I say that a little bit jaded, but like, it is what it is.
What kind of speed bumps have you come across in your career? Like,
how much time we got? Let me go ahead and open this water.
What's been tough? What's been the toughest part of your road?
Toughest part of my road, not having it all figured out and thinking that you should, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. And looking at people in other cities or friends and being like, man, like, I should be here.
Right.
But I name dropped my boy, Ted Baker. It was years ago when I was still trying to figure things out. He said, man, you got to run your own race. You got to run your own race. Yeah. I mean, I am. Right. And it was one of those moments where it was like, man, that's real. So I started running my own race. But, certainly not having it all figured out. I think not being born into it in a real way and having to break in and build relationships, which, I think I do pretty well. But a lot of this is all relatively new. Like, I'm 7 years in. Right. Right. And there are people who've been doing this 30 years. Just imagine what 30 years look like. Right. And I think we talked about it earlier. I mean, being the only one in the room, right? And seeing nothing, I'm going to say nothing overt, but I mean, there have been things where it's like, oh, so this is what this is, right? Yeah. And just some of the ignorance that I've, kind of had to deal with. But also just been lucky to not go through some of the things that other people have went through. And that's really a testament to people that look like me and people that have advocated for people that look like me working within this space. So I know the road could certainly have been a lot more difficult. And I know the road is certainly going to be more difficult because, again, life has a way of life and success is certainly not a straight line. It's more of a jungle gym. And I have gone up and down and all that. But, one, just like I said, not having it all figured out and then not necessarily being born into spaces that were built for me. Because none of this was built for us. No, right. In a very real way. Right. And being able to still navigate that. I mean, that somebody should write a book about that. Right. I'm sure somebody probably has already, but like it is, it's something that it isn't a continuous thought because I think you can kind of get lost in that and that kind of interferes with the way that you go about your daily. But, being in some of these spaces has certainly been interesting.
Yeah, I bet it has. Yeah. With locally, we have a lot of candidates. And are there any in particular that you support personally?
100%.
Okay, let's hear about it.
So I am kind of I'm unabashed about my ideology. So
Okay.
I believe that government can play a role in helping people,
Yep.
and should play a role in helping people, and that's based on some of the systemic issues that have, for so long, impeded progress for people from, racially disadvantaged groups.
Yep.
I believe that like women should have the right to choose to do with their bodies. So like there are a number of values that I think are important to check first before you start talking about candidates.
Yeah.
And those people kind of align with those things in a very real way.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I work for Joe Hogsett.
Yeah.
I know that there may be people that have issues with him, and that's cool.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the man gave me an opportunity. Has given a lot of younger people an opportunity, and I think is working to make the city better every day.
Okay.
I see that not only with him, but the people that he surrounds himself with. If we're just going down the list, Ryan Mears is someone that I support. I actually threw a fundraiser for him yesterday.
Yep.
There were 60 people there, 45 of which were Black.
Okay.
And 85% of those people had never been to a fundraiser before.
Wow.
So working to engage voters in a new way, new and innovative way in a sense. But one of the things that I think is really important about him, one, he has a tough job. I mean, that is a hard job. You're going to get blamed for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But his recognition that the criminal justice system treats certain people unfairly,
Yeah.
and trying to correct some of those wrongs is important, while also making sure that you're adhering to your job. Like you got a job to do.
Yep.
I know some friends that have come across me back in the day. All right. But so those are two, sort of high level. And then you certainly have a number of state rep candidates. I want to name them all, but then when I miss somebody, it's going to be an issue.
Right.
But we're lucky to have a number of Black elected officials around the city of Indianapolis, and we also have a number of younger officials around the city too. I'll throw one name out: Blake Johnson. Representative Blake Johnson is a close friend. I think is doing some awesome work.
Nice.
And then you have your city officials, and then next year you'll have city council races too. So I mean, it's a wide spectrum.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky to know these people in a real way, talk to these people, on any given day, working with, people like, Council President Vop Osley, Leader Maggie Lewis, on things, and being able to reach out to them and have them, be incredibly helpful and supportive. Specifically with their perspective on things has been great. And, I'll throw Leroy Robinson in there as well. So, again, I know there are people going like, man, you didn't say my name.
You didn't say my name,
You
man.
didn't say my name.
You didn't drop me.
But, it is what it is. And like I said, there are a number of them that have been incredibly helpful for me over the years, specifically around like the perspective piece. And, that can never be understated for me.
I think an important part of support is having the same ideology when it comes to politics.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really important. And it's hard to sometimes find that, because I think the average everyday person doesn't know their ideologies.
Oh, yeah.
They don't even know what's important to them.
Right.
And you have a candidate who's there for them, and they don't even know that they should be supporting them.
Yeah. And I think part of that is on the candidate. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be
they need to
reaching
engage
out.
those people the most.
100%.
Yeah,
right. And
that's a challenge to them.
Yep. And there are ways that data can kind of help guide some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The way that some of this data can be manipulated, for lack of a better term. You can get to the heart of the way people think in a way that you weren't able to do 20 years ago.
Right.
But you got to invest that time.
Yeah.
And then you got to think about what that time investment means, on this one voter. So, typically it's like, I want to reach as many voters as possible, but it's also about reaching those hubs of people who can go spread your message. So like I said, yesterday, 45 Black folks who had never been to a fundraiser, they're going to go tell 10 people.
Yeah.
Because they're going to see a commercial and it's going to say, hey, I met him.
Right.
He answered my question.
Yep.
Y'all should vote for him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't,
that ain't that simple sometimes, yeah.
And, people try to make it like it isn't that simple, but at the end of the day, it's money and votes.
It literally is, yeah.
Money and votes. And, that's when it's incumbent upon the elected officials to make sure they're doing that outreach. But like I said earlier, we got to take a step too, and really focus on what are the things you're passionate about.
Yep.
Whenever I sit down with somebody for coffee, I don't drink coffee, but I'm probably at 2 or 3 coffee meetings a week. I'm like, what are the 3 things that you care about? So focusing on those things. So if it's food insecurity, if it is public safety, if it's economic development, if those are the things that you care about, why don't we take some time to research a candidate and see what they've done within these spaces?
Yep.
And that, those passions also kind of are reflected in nonprofit work too, and, how you're involved and how you're volunteering. So, being able to identify those things and then being able to say, okay, these are people that align with this is important. Right. I think it's so easy sometimes to just get caught up in.
That sounds like an educated voter.
What are those?
That sounds like an educated voter.
Right?
Who is that?
But it takes, taking a couple hours.
Yeah.
This is what I'm passionate about. These are the candidates.
Yeah.
How do I align there?
Yeah. I have a problem with one of the worst words ever created to me.
Uh-oh, here we go. Let's go.
Tradition.
Ooh, tradition. Okay.
And I hate the word tradition because it just means that we just follow what everybody else did before us. We don't ask questions, we just do it. It's a tradition.
Yep.
And I think the political spectrum has a lot of tradition in it. And we have families, we have groups of people who just vote traditionally.
Yep.
And that's just so lazy and so 1950.
Yep.
And we're in 2022, about to be 2023, and I think people need to start thinking for themselves.
I mean, that's a bar. 100%, that's a bar right there. And it's, how do you, again, we're having this conversation, and, when I think about like politics in Indiana, there are probably like 600 people who are totally engaged. And I'm lucky to be a part of that 600, 300 Democrats, 300 Republicans. Those are the people who are super engaged.
Right.
We have to do a better job of explaining that to other folks.
True.
But what you realize is, man, you got to also do that for yourself too.
Facts.
And, gone are the days where I'm sending out an email the day before an election. I'm saying, this is who you vote for. Right. I hate doing that.
Right.
And I would do it just because I knew I was going to get those calls. Mm-hmm. Getting calls from ballot boxes on election day, my phone used to blow up. It's like, all right, bro, what you think? And there are certain people who relish in that kind of superiority, for lack of a better term. But it's just like, I want you to go educate yourself. Teach a man to fish, eat for a day, that sort of thing. But you got to want to do that. And I think it's incumbent upon elected officials and people that are involved to explain the importance of that. And it's something as simple as, when Ryan became prosecutor, he said he wasn't going to prosecute, low-level marijuana offenses. And that's something that, like, people have come up to me like, man, like, your boy? And I'm like, first off, who you talking about? Who you talking about? But, like, that's a very sort of, that's a very real application of the role that politics plays.
Right.
There's certain people who I want to prosecute everything. I want to throw everybody in jail.
Yeah.
Data shows that doesn't work. Right. If we want to rehabilitate people, we've got to show a little bit of grace and have a focus in a real sense. And I think, like I said, that's just one example of the role that politics plays in a real way. Yep. Yep.
We've been pretty serious.
Oh, shoot.
I just want to know, and I do kind of
like,
know.
yo, Greg, what do you do for fun? You just read books?
That's exactly where I'm going. Like, I know you like to have fun. You travel a lot.
I do.
What's a fun night for you?
That's a fun night for me.
In Indianapolis, what would you do on a fun night?
So it's changed, right?
Okay.
So I was at Red Room yesterday. That's where we
Yep.
held the fundraiser.
Yep.
And I'm sitting in there and I'm like, first off,
I was recording when you had that too. Yeah.
16-year-old me would be fascinated that you're throwing a fundraiser for a prosecutor. That's wild enough. I've also never seen Red Room during the day.
Yeah. What it looks like.
It's a very nice space. Very nice. I'm like, this is delightful. I literally said delightful. But a good night for me, like I said, it's changed. Like it used to be, we going out and we're not going to go out till midnight.
Yeah, right.
I can do it. I don't want to do it. All right. But a good night is having a couple sips of top shelf tequila at the crib.
Yeah.
Followed by a nice dinner at one of the, anywhere downtown specifically. May end up at like the Commodore.
Yeah.
Before it became like the club, like when it's kind of chill.
It's kind of packed now.
One of my OGs, his name is Kip too. Last week we were having a drink at Thieves of all places,
Yep.
and Kip is like 60, and we get there and he's like, I feel like a cocktail bar shouldn't be this loud, and I'm like, things change, big homie. But as we're sitting there, I'm like, damn, you're right. I really can't hear you talk, right?
Right.
And that's the change, right? Like I want to have, good conversation, good liquor, and go to the crib.
Yeah.
But also recognize that sometimes I ain't got a drink.
Right.
Which is new for a person that has been in those trenches.
You're right. I've been in them with you.
Yes. How are we here? Right. But it's that's a good night. That's a good night for me. A good dinner, good conversation with friends, maybe meeting some new people.
Yeah.
This city is small, right? I've grown up here.
It's a very big, small city.
I feel like everyone, and that can cause issues in certain areas.
Right.
But being able to meet people that make you think a little bit differently, that kind of expand the way that you view things is pretty great too.
Good.
Yeah. What about you, man? It was a good night for you. I've been asking questions. You've been asking all the questions. I'm gonna throw it back real quick.
All right.
Yeah.
A good night for me?
Okay.
A good night for me would probably be somewhere downtown eating. I'll be eating downtown first.
Okay.
And then probably hit somewhere in Fountain Square.
Okay. Look at us growing
I know,
up.
like Fountain Square. We're like,
you know what you want to say. Patron saint, downstairs, lit.
No, you don't go there till 1.
And I want to say it's back in the day, but like, nah.
I guess you know what the best. I think the best day for me is I go to brunch at Oakmont.
Strong. Shout out to my man Chris.
Yeah,
Chris and Gus. Shout out to my man.
This is the second night we shouted out Oakmont, but after the Oakmont, we go to SOS. You know the trail.
Yeah.
You know the downtown trail. And then after SOS, we hit Patron.
Okay.
That's
Strong.
that's a whole day.
What time does brunch start? Because that is a day.
Yeah,
right?
brunch starts at I think
noon.
You
want to say noon?
Noon.
Okay.
I think noon.
You got those coaches in there. If you're hitting the trail,
no, you're gonna hit coaches
on the trail.
You're gonna hit coaches on the trail. I left out coaches, but after Oakmont you go to coaches.
Okay.
After coaches you go to SOS.
Yep.
And then after SOS you go Patron.
Yeah. Yep. I've certainly done it.
That is,
and this is a plug. Where's the camera?
That's
this
the trail.
Is a plug for Pedialyte right here. Fountain of youth.
Now I'm going to hit you with the old Follow D Money signature question.
Okay.
It is, how would you define success?
How would I define success? When I'm 70 years old, I tell great stories.
That's successful.
That is success to me. Money's going to come. I know that that's on the way. Way that my faith structure and belief structure and belief in God, like in terms of resources, you do a good job and those things are going to work themselves out, which is a very optimistic way to look at things.
Yeah.
Right. But when I think about success, man, it is truly being able to tell great stories and having great relationships and being able to talk thoughtfully about the things that you've done, and looking at a number of my OGs, I'm just fascinated by their stories. And they think about, and they say, man, this got to be boring to you. But like as a political nerd, hearing some of the stories from back in the day, I'm like, man, this is fascinating, right? Like hearing about like JFK and, a family's house in Indianapolis and seeing the pictures. It's like, that's fascinating to me. That's a great story.
Right.
The importance of stories can never be undersold to me.
Yeah.
Name dropping again, Anthony Murdoch, who you got to have on the show. I think Anthony Murdoch is one of the most talented, thoughtful leaders within the city. He's not a younger leader, he's a leader now. One of our greatest storytellers. And has really done a great job of telling his story, telling other stories, but also empowering other people to tell their own stories. The man is 10 years younger than me, but when he talks, I listen. When he talks, people listen.
Right.
Like I said, success for me is being able to tell great stories when I'm 70. What kind of other responses do you get to that?
I've heard that success is finding happiness in doing something that you're passionate about.
Okay.
I've heard that success is planting seeds for success for other people.
Okay.
Like being successful and bringing up people into their own success.
Yeah.
I've heard success is just being happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, man.
What do you say? What's yours?
I tend to think that success for me is having a farm of people that I've planted seeds.
A farm? Ooh.
I planted seeds and they've...
The imagery.
Like my success is a farm.
Okay.
And I planted seeds for people to build and create their own forms of success. Like I don't think I can be successful without a forest of other people along with me.
Okay. Strong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see success as an individual trait.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. I think that success is a whole team. Like I think that even with the little success that I've had with this podcast, I can't have it with everybody in this room.
Right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like they've all done something with their selves alongside me.
It feels a lot better when you're able to do it with people.
Yeah. You share in success.
Yeah. You share the struggle and you share the success, and like you never forget those stories. So when I talk about like we lost that campaign, like all those people on that campaign, I got a family, but I've been able to build upon my sort of nuclear family in a real way because of the work that we did and, the intention that went into that. So the struggles and the successes with your team, there's nothing like it.
It's nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything else but one last question.
Okay.
Now.
Uh-oh. you hyping this one up.
This one, it ain't that bad.
Okay.
But if you had to take everything that you're doing now and you had to take that out of your life and then you had to find a completely different field of work to work in, what work and what field, what area would you go into?
Boy, part of it for me is recognizing that I'm just like a cleverly disguised adult, and I show up to work some days and I'm like, man, this is my job. Like I get to do this. This is wild.
Right.
But I am a writer at heart.
Okay.
So every day there is really going back damn near 10 years. Journals, right?
Yeah,
like
I journal now. Yeah,
I am like I'm not one of those TikTok ones that gets up at like 4:30 and I stretch and then I drink my green tea and then I journal for 20. I don't do that. Like as I'm wrapping up the day or even sometimes getting ready, just kind of jotting down. Okay, these are the things I need to do.
Yeah.
But also reflecting on things.
Yeah.
So if all this went away and I was able to do whatever I wanted, I'd be a writer. 100%.
Dope.
There have been a number of book ideas that have been started and stopped.
Dope.
I'm great at ideas, and every now and then I just need someone to kind of do some of the operational stuff.
Write a book, man.
We got some stories that need to be told.
Yeah,
we certainly got some stories that need to be told. I was a hip hop blogger for a while for a number of different websites.
Yep.
got to interview a very early Kendrick Lamar back in the day.
Dope.
Very, very, very early Kendrick Lamar. But like I was telling you before we got on, like you feel like you had to grow up, and it's like, man, I ain't making no money on this. This is all volunteer.
Right.
But it was a thing that was like keeping me going.
Yep.
And kind of, keeping those creative juices flowing is something that I'm looking forward to getting back to.
Yeah.
Just because other people say I'm pretty nice with the pen.
Okay.
Pretty nice.
Okay.
But that would be it, man.
Yeah.
It'd be writing in some sort of capacity.
I plan on writing a book myself.
Yeah.
I have no idea about what though.
Yeah.
And I write every day.
Compile them.
Yeah. I'm just writing until I get an idea.
There you go.
I think that's what I'm doing.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
I do a quote of the month list on my IG, right? And I've been doing it for like 2 years. People are like, you need to put this in a book and just put it out there. Because it's a lot of it's like ratchet and righteous. And that is like the mix of my life.
Yeah.
Like ratchet versus righteous any day. But it doesn't, you can make it your own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to look at too. Like we think like writing a book is this incredible,
journey.
This journey. I'm just like, man, just write it down.
Right.
Just do it.
Right.
Take a shot and see what happens. And, one day we'll see. Well, there's certainly some stories, specifically Indianapolis specific stories that I think have a way of touching America in a very real way that I've seen and I've been a part of. And, whether that is like fraternity life during like the mid 2000s and what that looked like, or growing up at a high school that was relatively diverse from an Indiana standpoint. I mean, all these stories I think have not been told, but there's so many people that connect to them in a very real way, and being able to sort of show people like, yo, you ain't the only one that went through this.
Yeah.
I think is important. So if you're able to tap into something like that, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. But, the quote thing, I think may have to happen just because it's, and it'll be stuff.
Are they your own quotes?
Nah, I'm not that, I'm not that narcissistic yet. but it's the stuff that friends, I'll be out with friends and they'll say something like, man, that was kind of deep. Or like, damn, that was hilarious.
Right.
And it's like, I'll write it down. So,
that's dope.
a little something, but, I certainly want to be more intentional about that and get back to that in a real way. But I got a big boy job that
takes up a little time.
Yeah, it takes up a little time. Big boy job, big boy problems, and big boy taxes too. So,
all right. Well, shout out your IG so people can follow you.
Yeah, man. Check me out. I got it private, but you can. right.
I mean, it's private,
right? But you can try.
Shoot your shot.
G Stowers too, man. You can also check out #LunchBagIndy, which is a nonprofit.
I wanted to get into that.
And I can just drop real quick, man. So #LunchBag started in LA in 2012.
Yep.
Was a part of a small group that got it kind of rekindled here in 2015. Over the past 7 years, we've done 35,000 meals around the county. COVID has kind of thrown us off a bit.
Yep.
I want to shout out my man Lauren Ray, who's been instrumental in everything that we've been doing. But with COVID, it's kind of changed things, and then life shifts. You got to focus on the bag a little bit, but it's one of those things that keeps me going, kind of like writing.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll be back at that. But #LunchBagIndy is our IG handle there. Make sure that you check out a number of the events, whether it be Mitch Daniels related, which I am a Democrat in a Mitch Daniels group, which is fascinating. But I think it speaks to the importance of building relationships.
Right. I mean, I don't think that should matter.
Shouldn't.
If you like a person and you like what they're about, it shouldn't matter.
I was selected for their fellows program, and it was awesome kind of being in that space and being able to push back on things. Also check out Indie Hub. They do a number of really great events, and Washington Township, which is where we are now.
Dope.
They'll be holding a number of events coming up soon. So
sweet.
Yeah, man. I hope I got all the plugs. I know I didn't name all the politicians, and people are gonna be mad that I didn't say all the things, but we got a limited amount of time. I feel like the homies to my left are like, time. But nah, man, this has been great, man. Thank you for the opportunity. And
Absolutely,
next time I'll bring a nice little bottle of tequila for the homies.
Or I'll bring some bourbon. I'll have
Let's
something.
do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it, man.
I want to thank you for coming out, man. I really appreciate the time, the information, the education
Yeah.
That was dope, and I'm sure everybody else appreciates it. I would like everyone to go to followdmoney.com. We got some sweet sweatshirts. We got a donate button. We got all kind of things. Please go to followdmoney.com. Peace.
Strong.